Hey guys, how's it going? So, I've had a lot of questions about the Bond ID lab report, and I thought it would be a good idea to just kind of go through, make a video of it, and talk about what it is that I'm exactly wanting. So, as a quick reminder, this entire 4 day lab is going to need the following things. You're going to need a total of 6 lab reports. Okay. So there's going to be one for the melting point of knowns. Knowns. There we go. No, knowns. There. Yeah, there we go. Knowns. Melting point of knowns. And then you're going to need another one for the solubility of knowns. Another one for the conductivity of knowns. Then you'll need a flowchart. And then I'll talk about the flowchart in a little bit. Then you'll need a melting point of unknowns and solubility of unknowns, and you guessed it, conductivity of unknowns. Then at the end, you'll need a summary table with bond IDs. All right, so let's go through and talk about these. So for these lab reports, these first three and these bottom three, you're going to need to go through and do exactly the same thing you would do for any other lab report. So as a reminder, those things are going to need a title, and melting point of knowns is a decent enough title there. So I kind of gave you the titles right across. You'll need a description of the lab. So that is just kind of a, expand the title. Instead of saying melting point of knowns, tell me a little bit more about it. Describe what's going on. And then hypotheses. So let's talk about these real quick. You'll need a null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis, remember, is you do a thing and nothing happens. So for the melting point, for example, I could say when heated, the substance did nothing. That would be a good hypothesis for a null hypothesis. And again, this is for the melting point. We heat the thing, nothing happens. This is going to indicate, indicating either a metallic bond or ionic bond. So this second part isn't really part of your hypothesis. This is part of your conclusion. But if you want to put it into the hypothesis, that's fine. So null hypothesis is really you do something, we heated the substance, and it did nothing. That's what null hypothesis means. And in this case, things with high melting points, when we heat something and it doesn't do anything, it has a high melting point, it indicates metallic or ionic bonds. For an alternative hypothesis, we do something when heated, the substance melted. It did something. We heated it and it melted. And this indicates that the bond is polar or non-polar covalent. Polar, non-polar covalent. And there you go. So that would be the hypotheses for melting point. And with solubility, you can just, change heated to added into water or added into a solvent, and it did nothing. Alternative, when added to water, it dissolved. When added to hexane, it dissolved. Conductivity, when tested for conductivity, it did nothing. When tested for conductivity, it conducted electricity. Okay, so there's that. After that, you need your materials. Materials is pretty straightforward. List the things that you used. And methods. Remember, the big thing here is step by step procedure. So this is a step-by-step procedure. I have seen a few people, not many, but go through and just write like a paragraph. Think of this like a cookbook, right? You have, step one, do something. Step two, do something else, and just kind of step by step work through that. After that, you have results. This is another thing people were asking me about. What should these data tables look like? In general, this is what I say. You've learned how to make data tables since the second grade. I know that because my second grader is starting to make tables. But the problem is that throughout high school, everyone has just kind of given you a blank table and said fill it out instead of asking you to design your own. Again, congratulations, you've leveled up. You get to design your own tables now. If you need some assistance for that, what I like to do is put materials in one column and then the tests on the other. So for example, let me just make a table here. Let's make this. There we go. All right, let's make a table. And here we have substance and melting point. So for substance one, for your knowns, I know that there is sodium chloride. I know there is sucrose and wax and aluminum. Those were the known substances that I gave you. If it's the unknown, you would just change this to, substance 1, 5, 17, whatever your numbers were that you got, 20, let's say. And for melting point, in this case, we kind of had two things. It was either high or low. So that was your melting point there. So let's say substance 1 was high, substance 5 was high, 17 was low, and 20 was high. Another thing you might want to do is insert column to the right. You might want to have a notes column. This is going to be useful because you might say it's high, but it turned white. Maybe it didn't actually melt, but it went from a blue color to a white color. Didn't melt, but it did something. That could be another column you add. Is it necessary? No. Is it nice to have? Sure. So that would be another data table you could have, or a column you can have in your data table. So that's that. If you wanted to take this exact same thing and turn it into a solubility table, you can do that. Keep your substance column, say solubility, and in water. The other side, you can do solubility in hexane. And here you can just say yes, yes, no, whoop, no, no. And solubility in hexane, no, no, yes, no. So there you go. You can, there's a data table for the solubility test. And you can do the same thing with conductivity. So just a substance column and then results there. All right. After that, you do need a conclusion. And for conclusion, this is just you talking about the results and what it means. So that's like this part right here. So if I'm doing a solubility, like up here, I could say substances 1 and 5 could be either ionic or polar based on their solubility, substance 17 could be nonpolar, and substance 20 could be metallic. And this is just based on their solubility up here. You remember, you're doing 3 different tests, so melting point 1 and 5 might show something different. And that may help you determine if their 1 is ionic or 5 is polar, so on and so forth. And then last thing is future work. Again, future work is just like for this future work, it can you could say we don't have a good indication on substance 1 and 5. It could be polar or ionic. We don't know. So future work, it could be like further testing of 1 and 5 to determine the bond ID. We could do a melting point test. Melting point test would be helpful. There we go. So something like that. Of course, I'm being very short and concise here because I don't want this. This is already a 12-minute video at this point, so I want this to be a little bit more thought out and expand on it a little bit more. Okay, so that would be your work as far as the lab reports. And remember, you're going to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these lab reports. 3 for the knowns, 3 for the unknowns. Okay. The flowchart, what is that going to look like? Well, a flowchart, let me actually draw this because it's easier for me to draw than anything. So let's say we have, you want a flowchart to kind of look like this. You have, one sec, let me get a fresh sheet of paper here. All right. So we want the flowchart to kind of look like this. We start up here with, and then with our substance, right? Then you're going to draw a line down, make another box, and this box is going to be some sort of test. Let's say melting point. Melting point test. Then you're going to have 2 options, right? It can either be high or low melting point. And then you make another test on both sides. Maybe this test is going to be conductivity. Conductivity. And then for that, you have more options, and it kind of just keeps branching off. And then at the end, after you have all three tests, after you have all three tests in there, let's say that this one is your solubility test with three things. You have polar, or let's say hexane, H2O, and neither. Then you're going to go through and put a box and actually put what type of bond it is. So at this point, you could say, yes, it is a polar bond. Actually, looking at this, melting point is high, conductivity in solution, and it's soluble in H2O. That's going to be an ionic bond. So you're going to do this and fill out all of these things. And get to the bond at the end. So this is going to be a big branching tree all the way down to a certain bond. Some people were asking, well, do I do this just for the knowns or for the unknowns? This should be kind of a generic tree. Basically, if you handed this to someone, they should be able to follow it down. It's like, I have a substance. I want to know what type of bond it is. Okay, I'm going to do a melting point. Okay, it has low melting point, so I'm going to move it over here. Then I'm going to do a conductivity. Then the conductivity says that it is not conductive. Okay, then I'm going to do a solubility test. Do different things, and this is, it dissolves in hexane. Well, I know that if it has a low melting point, it is not conductive, and it dissolves in hexane, then it is going to be nonpolar. So you're going to go through and do that. That is going to be what your flowchart should look like. All right. So there's all that. The last thing is this summary table with bond IDs. Let me kind of just show you that real quick. Table, this is going to be a pretty big table. 5. I think I need about 8. 9. Let's do 9. So here, same thing. We have the substance. We're going to do melting point, the solubility in H2O, the solubility in hexane. We're going to do conductivity as solid, conductivity in solution, and then last thing is bond ID. We don't actually need these guys, so let me get rid of them. Delete. There we go. So here we have, in substance, this is going to be your unknowns. Let's say we had 1, 5, 10, and 21, let's say. This is where you're going to summarize all of your results. So for melting point, maybe this one is high, and it did dissolve in water, but not in hexane. It did not conduct as a solid, but it conducted as a solution. So then you would go through and think, okay, what type of bond is this? It has a high melting point, dissolves in water, but not in hexane, and conducts as a solution. What type of bond is that? Well, that sounds like an ionic bond to me. Ionic bonds have high melting point, they dissolve in water, and so on and so forth. You might have a situation like this. Maybe you have something that is a low melting point. It dissolves in water, not in hexane, doesn't conduct there, and does conduct as in solution. So you have this type of thing. What does this look like? Well, it has a low melting point, dissolves in water, so on and so forth. Okay, this is going to be a polar bond. You just keep going with that. So this is going to be the last thing you do. This is kind of that summary table which summarizes everything. And that's that. Okay. Hopefully that helped answer some questions. If you went through and did something wrong, and you know you did something wrong, feel free to correct it and resubmit. That's perfectly fine. I'd rather you. I haven't really started grading those because the due date's not until tonight. If you want to resubmit, that's fine. If you still need help on this, come talk to me. I can kind of walk you through it. All right, guys. Hopefully that helps. I will see you guys tomorrow.